The boardroom felt like ice. Not the ice of winter air, but the polished chill of glass and steel, the hum of climate control, the sharp scent of expensive leather chairs. 12 executives of Orion Tech sat across from me in perfect formation, each one holding a tablet, each one waiting for me to convince them that my company deserved their future. I had prepared for this moment for 8 months. I had memorized every figure, rehearsed every answer to every possible objection, studied every pause and every smile of the people in front of me. I told myself there was nothing left to fear. And then it happened. A gray rectangle slid across the corner of my screen with surgical precision. Employment terminated. Effective immediately. I froze. For a fraction of a second, the world blurred. The voice of Orion's CEO became a dull murmur. My heart hammered so loudly that I thought the entire room could hear it, but I blinked once, forced air into my lungs, and continued speaking. My mouth shaped the next sentence as if nothing had changed. As you can see on slide 9, the integration pathway delivers a 26% efficiency gain in the first 2 quarters. No tremor betrayed me. My hand moved to the clicker, my eyes stayed on the audience, and I kept talking. I spoke about implementation models, cost reductions, the long-term growth potential. I kept the rhythm steady. To them I was calm, composed, in control. Inside I was burning. 8 months of research, travel, negotiations, and trust building had just been dismissed in 6 words. Helios Global had cut me loose in the middle of the very pitch that could have defined my career. They thought they were humiliating me, erasing me, reducing me to silence in front of the people who mattered most. But humiliation is a choice, and I did not choose it. When I reached the final slide, Orion's CFO leaned forward. She was known as difficult, someone who rarely showed approval. Yet now she nodded slowly, lips pressed in a line that carried weight. Another executive whispered to a colleague and they both smiled. I closed my tablet as though I still owned the future. I thanked them for their time. I stood straight, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor as I left the room. Not one of them suspected what had just happened. Not one of them realized that the strategist in front of them no longer had a company behind her. To them, I was still Adriana Cross, a woman of poise and precision. But I knew the truth. In that room, I had been both fired and freed. I walked through the corridors of Orion headquarters with measured steps. I passed assistants, security guards, young analysts rushing with laptops. None of them knew that my life had been severed in an instant. The elevator doors closed and I exhaled for the first time since the notification appeared. In the silence, I let the anger surface. They had stolen my proposal before. They had sidelined me in meetings, whispered about replacements, plotted my removal. And now they had chosen the cruelest stage for the final blow. They believed they had ended me, but they had forgotten something. My value had never belonged to Helios. The vision, the strategy, the relationships I had built with clients, all of it was mine. They could strip away the badge and the email address, but they could not strip away the mind that created those things. By the time I stepped into the parking lot, the decision was already made. I would not crawl back. I would not beg. I would not even fight them on their terms. I would simply create something that could not be touched by their politics and their arrogance. I unlocked my car and slid behind the wheel. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some confused, some sympathetic, some pretending ignorance. I ignored them all. I drove out of Orion's glass fortress and into the streets of the city where every light felt like a new beginning. They thought they had silenced me. What they had done was give me the stage I truly needed. This was not the end of my story. It was the first page. The city outside my windshield blurred into streaks of gray and silver. Traffic honked and lights flickered red and green, but I barely noticed. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every breath carried a tremor I did not allow to reach my face in that boardroom. Now, alone in my car, the tremor had room to live. I replayed the moment in my head again and again. The sterile rectangle, the 6 words, employment terminated, effective immediately, the arrogance of timing. Who had pressed the button? Victor, HR. Maybe even the CEO himself, sitting in his office miles away, sipping coffee while he cut away years of my life with a keystroke. For a moment, I imagined storming back into Helios headquarters, demanding answers, shattering their smug smiles with the truth of what I knew. I could picture the faces, Morgan from HR, with her careful tone and rehearsed empathy. Victor, leaning back in his chair as if he already owned everything he touched. Grayson, our CEO, pretending ignorance, claiming it was all strategic restructuring. But I did not turn my car toward their tower. I turned it in the opposite direction. I drove until the streets narrowed, until glass and steel gave way to brick and modest storefronts. There, in the quiet corner of the city, stood a building with no sign and no history. The office space I had rented 2 weeks earlier waited for me. I parked, cut the engine, and sat still for a long time. My heart slowed. My pulse steadied. The fury cooled into something sharper. Resolve. Inside the lobby, the lights buzzed faintly. The hallway smelled of fresh paint. The door to the second floor stuck a little before it opened, as if even the building itself tested my determination. I stepped into a room where 2 people already waited. Sophia Lane, her hair tied back, her eyes sharp behind thin glasses, sat at the end of a long table with a folder spread before her. She looked up when I entered, and for once her professional calm cracked. "They fired you during the pitch, didn't they?" she asked. I set my bag on the table. "Yes," her jaw tightened. "Cowards." Across from her sat Marcus Doyle, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a laptop open but forgotten. He smiled when he saw me, the kind of smile meant to reassure. "I told you," he said softly, "they would underestimate you, even in the way they tried to end you." I sank into a chair. The weight of the morning finally pressed into my bones, but I refused to let it bend me. "Orion will not forget what they saw," I said. "They will remember the strategist who held the room together while her own company cut her loose." Sophia leaned forward. "Before you take another step, I need certainty. Every document, every framework you pulled from Helios systems. You are sure it belongs to you?" I met her gaze. "I made sure of it. I know the contracts better than they do. I left behind everything proprietary. What I took is mine. My models, my presentations, my architecture, they cannot touch it." She exhaled, the tension leaving her shoulders. Marcus closed his laptop with a soft click. "Then Aurelia Consulting is no longer theory, it is real." The name echoed in the empty office, bouncing off white walls. Aurelia, a name I had chosen in secret, tucked away in files labeled with numbers instead of words. A name that meant dawn, light after darkness. I had imagined this moment 100 times. But now, sitting in that bare office with 2 allies, it felt different. Less like rebellion, more like inevitability. Still, something flickered in Marcus's eyes as he looked at me. A hesitation too quick to catch but real enough that it stayed with me. I filed it away in silence. For now, I allowed myself a moment of stillness. A moment to feel the shift. This morning, I had been Helios's strategist. Now I was something else entirely. Something freer. I did not yet know how far Aurelia would go, but I knew one truth with absolute clarity. Helios had not ended me. They had given me the chance to become what I was meant to be. The room felt too large for just the 3 of us. The walls were white and bare, the desks unscarred by use. It smelled of paint and potential. I rubbed my palms together, still carrying the ghost of cold from the boardroom. Sophia adjusted her glasses and flipped through the folder in front of her. Contracts, timelines, articles of incorporation, all the bones of a company waiting for breath. "I know you are angry," she said, "but anger is a fire that burns too quickly. We need precision now. Every move you make from this point has to be careful." "I am past anger," I answered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "They wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they gave me clarity. From now on, I do not waste energy fighting their games. I build my own." Marcus smiled, leaning back in his chair. Spoken like someone who has already moved on. I studied him. He looked relaxed, almost too relaxed, as though this moment was easier for him than for me. He had always been good at masks, at smoothing over rough edges with calm words. That flicker in his eyes returned for just an instant, but he blinked and it vanished. "Orion is unsettled," I continued. "They reached out to Helios this morning. They asked for confirmation that I would remain their point of contact." Helios pushed Victor forward instead. Sophia's lips curved in disdain. "Victor, they are handing him your work now." "They already did," I said. "Long before today, my merger proposal, my integration framework. He presented them to the board as his own. I did not challenge him then. I only saved my evidence. I knew the day would come when I would need it." Sophia nodded. "Good, evidence is power." Marcus tapped the table softly, almost absent-mindedly. "And clients do not care about evidence. They care about trust. Orion trusted you, not Helios." The truth of his words struck me like a chord. Orion did not applaud Helios this morning. They applauded me. Their nods and whispers belonged to me alone. "They will reach out," I said quietly. "Not today, but soon, and when they do, Aurelia must be ready." I looked around the room, 3 laptops, a folder of contracts, a name, that was all. And yet it felt alive, as if walls could hum with ambition. Sophia smiled faintly. "Then let us give Aurelia her first breath." We began. She read out the legal structures we would need. Marcus outlined basic financial models. I scribbled notes, adding targets, sketching the skeleton of a strategy. Hours passed without us noticing. The daylight outside faded into evening, painting the windows in shades of orange and blue. At one point I stood, stretching, staring out at the city below. Neon signs flickered to life. Cars streamed like rivers of light. Somewhere in those towers, Helios executives probably celebrated my removal, congratulating themselves on a clean elimination. I smiled to myself. They had no idea. When I sat back down, Sophia was watching me with an expression I could not read. Not pity, something sharper. "You have changed," she said. "Firing does that to a person," I replied. "No," she shook her head. "You were always strong, but now you are untethered. They cannot control you anymore. That is dangerous for them." Her words lingered in the air. Marcus chuckled, folding his arms. "Then let us make sure we use that danger wisely. Build slowly. Strike only when the time is right." His calmness soothed me for a moment, but as I looked at him, I felt again that subtle unease, the flicker in his eyes, the hesitation hidden behind smiles. I told myself I was imagining it, that paranoia came naturally after betrayal. Still, a voice inside whispered caution. I pushed it aside. We worked until the city outside fell quiet. When I finally stepped out into the night, the air was crisp and clean. I drew in a long breath, tilted my head toward the dark sky, and let it fill me. Today I had been fired. But tonight, something new had been born. When I arrived home that night, the silence of my apartment pressed in on me. The glass windows looked out over the same skyline I had admired earlier, but now the view carried a different weight. Those towers no longer own me. I set my bag down and allowed myself, for the first time all day, to sit still. The exhaustion seeped into my bones. My heels ached. My throat was raw from holding steady through hours of presentation, and yet my mind would not rest. I made tea, the way I always did when clarity was needed. Steam curled upward, blurring the reflection of my face in the kitchen window. I looked older in that glass, though not from years, from battles fought in silence. Memories pressed against me. My first day at Helios, years ago, walking into their gleaming lobby with a heart full of ambition. Back then, I believed in the dream they sold. Innovation, collaboration, global vision. I gave them my loyalty, my hours, my ideas. I believed they would value me for the work I delivered. But corporations do not value people. They value control. The image of Victor rose unbidden in my mind. His practiced smile, his polished shoes, his way of claiming credit with a single sentence that twisted truth into ownership. I remembered the first time I caught him presenting my framework as his own. I had sat in that boardroom, my name erased from my own creation, and I had stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was patient. Now patience had carried me to this moment. I carried my tea to the desk where a single folder waited. Inside were the beginnings of Oralia, company registration forms, drafts of strategies I had developed on weekends, hidden under code names. It was fragile, like a seed not yet planted, but it was alive. I traced the letters of the name I had chosen. Oralia. Dawn, my phone buzzed again. Messages continued to pour in, some from colleagues still at Helios, pretending confusion. What happened? Did you quit? Is it true? Others from people who knew the truth but lacked the courage to say it aloud. And a few from competitors in the industry, circling like vultures, curious if I was vulnerable enough to pick apart. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not emails, not reports, but a plan, step by step. What Oralia would be, what values it would stand for, what kind of team I would build. Each word steadied me. Each sentence felt like reclaiming something that Helios had tried to steal. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The city outside softened into silence, only the faint glow of street lamps remaining. My eyelids burned with fatigue, but I kept writing, because this was no longer about survival. It was about creation. When finally I closed the laptop, I leaned back in my chair and let the exhaustion wash over me. My body trembled with weariness, but deep inside burned a steady flame. I whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear. They wanted me gone. Instead, they gave me freedom. Helios may have written my termination notice, but Oralia will be my answer. I finished my tea, now cold, and went to bed. Sleep came slowly, haunted by fragments of the day. The boardroom, the faces of Orion's executives, the sterile rectangle of those 6 words. Yet beneath it all, there was something else. Not dread, not grief, but anticipation. For the first time in years, tomorrow was truly mine. Morning light slipped through the blinds of our small office, pale and unfinished like the room itself. The walls were still bare, the desks plain, the carpet smelling faintly of glue from recent installation. It was not much, but it was ours. I arrived earlier than usual, carrying coffee for 3. Sophia was already at the table, papers spread across the surface in tidy stacks. She looked up at me, her sharp eyes softening for only a moment before she returned to her reading. "You are making the news," she said. I placed the cups down. "Good or bad?" She handed me her tablet. An article glared back: "Senior strategist departs Helios after major pitch." The text was vague, the usual corporate smokescreen. But the comments beneath told the real story. Some called it betrayal, others said it was politics. A few, though, spoke of respect. They had seen the presentation. They noticed how I never faltered even as Helios abandoned me. I handed the tablet back. "They will spin it however they want. I cannot control that." "But you can control what you do next," Sophia replied. The door opened and Marcus entered, his sleeves rolled up as always, a laptop tucked under his arm. He looked refreshed, as though the chaos had not touched him at all. He greeted us with his usual calm smile. "Any casualties?" He asked lightly, nodding toward the article still open on Sophia's screen. "Only reputations," I said. "Mine will recover, theirs may not." He chuckled, setting his laptop on the table. Spoken like someone already thinking 2 steps ahead. We settled in, the 3 of us around a single table, planning to build a company from nothing. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt inevitable. Sophia outlined the structure. "We will need articles of incorporation, tax IDs, banking relationships. I can file most of the paperwork within 48 hours. I nodded. "Do it under the name Aurelia Consulting." The name felt heavier now that it had been spoken aloud in front of them. Aurelia, dawn, a symbol of light breaking through. Marcus raised his brows, intrigued. "Aurelia, I like it. Memorable, elegant, easy to trust." Sophia scribbled the name at the top of her notes. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But before we breathe life into this, I need certainty, Adriana. Every file you pulled from Helios, every model, every projection. Are you absolutely sure none of it can be claimed as theirs?" I met her gaze without hesitation. "I studied every clause of every contract. I built my own frameworks on my own time. What I brought with me belongs to me." Her shoulders eased. "Good, because if they find even a thread to tug, they will use it." For the first time since arriving, Marcus spoke less smoothly. He tapped a rhythm on the table, eyes unfocused. Then he smiled quickly, too quickly. "She knows what she is doing," he said. "Let us not doubt her now." The flicker was back. That hesitation I had noticed before. It passed in a blink, but it scratched at me like a nail on glass. I filed it away. We continued. We mapped potential clients, starting with Orion Tech. They had paused their agreement with Helios, still waiting for clarity. Sophia argued for caution, but I knew they would reach out. Trust, once broken, is not easily mended. Helios had broken theirs. By late afternoon, the office no longer felt bare. Papers covered the table, whiteboards carried half-finished diagrams, laptops hummed with activity. For the first time since that cold boardroom, I felt alive again. As the sun dipped low, painting the walls with streaks of gold, I leaned back in my chair and let the moment wash over me. We were still small, fragile, barely more than an idea, but Aurelia was real now. Breathing, growing, I thought of the sterile rectangle on my tablet. Employment terminated, effective immediately. 6 words meant to erase me. I smiled faintly. Those words had not been an ending. They had been a beginning. Night fell quickly. The hum of traffic outside softened into distant murmurs, and the fluorescent lights above us buzzed against the silence. Sophia packed her folders into a neat pile, preparing to leave. Marcus lingered, scrolling through something on his laptop, his face half lit by the screen. "You should get some rest," Sophia told me. "Tomorrow we begin for real." I nodded, though I knew I would not sleep. When she was gone, Marcus stayed behind. He leaned back, his chair creaking. "You really are not shaken at all, are you?" he asked. "I am shaken," I admitted, "but I am not broken." He smiled, slow and deliberate. "That is why they feared you." His words should have comforted me. Instead, they left a faint unease. His tone was warm, but his eyes were calculating, as though he were already measuring what this new venture could become and what his place in it might be. I turned off the lights and locked the door behind us. At home, exhaustion clung to me, but sleep would not come. My mind replayed the past months in fragments. I remembered the meeting where Victor first stole from me. It had been a small gathering, just department heads and the CEO. I had worked for weeks on an integration model for a mid-size client, polishing every angle. Victor presented first that day, smiling as though he owned the room. Slide after slide, I saw my own work flash across the screen. No acknowledgement, no mention of my name. I had sat frozen, nails biting into my palm. When the CEO praised him, I forced myself to smile. Later, I confronted Victor in private. "You took my framework," he shrugged. "I refined it. It was mine. And now it is ours," he said. "That is how this place works. You want credit, you fight for it. You want survival, you adapt." That was the day I realized Helios would never protect me. From that point, I began protecting myself. I saved my drafts under encrypted names. I filed away proof of authorship. I built quietly the foundation of something that could exist without them. Aurelia was not born in a single night. She had been growing in the shadows for years. The next morning, I returned to the office before either Sophia or Marcus arrived. The sun had barely risen, casting the city in pale silver. I unlocked the door and stood in the middle of the room, breathing in the silence. This was no longer an empty space. It was possibility. I wrote on the whiteboard in bold strokes, principles. Underneath, I wrote 3 words: clarity, integrity, trust. Helios had thrived on the opposite: confusion, manipulation, control. Aurelia would be different. Every decision, every strategy, every client interaction would stand on those pillars. By the time Sophia walked in, I was already sketching potential client pipelines. She smiled faintly, setting down her coffee. "You never stop, do you?" "I cannot afford to," I said. Marcus arrived later, carrying pastries as if to lighten the mood. "Founders need fuel," he joked. He placed the box on the table, but when he leaned over to look at the whiteboard, his eyes lingered on the word integrity. For a heartbeat, something unreadable crossed his face. Then the smile returned. We worked through the day. Sophia drafted incorporation documents. Marcus polished financial projections. I began drafting a message to Orion Tech. Not a pitch, not a plea, simply a note of gratitude. I thanked them for their time, expressed appreciation for their trust during the presentation, and left a door open for future collaboration through Aurelia. It was honest. It was enough. When the email was sent, I sat back, exhaling slowly. The first step had been taken. That night, as I left the office, I caught Marcus watching me again, his expression unreadable in the dim light. For a moment, I wondered if he was already weighing options, balancing loyalty against opportunity. I told myself not to dwell on it, but deep down I knew. Seeds of betrayal are always planted early, long before they sprout. And still, I welcomed him. Because at that moment, Aurelia needed every ally it could claim. That evening, after Sophia had gone home and Marcus disappeared into the night with his usual quiet smile, I sat alone in the office. The city lights blinked through the blinds, painting thin stripes of gold across the whiteboard. The silence carried me back to my final weeks inside Helios. I remembered the sterile office of human resources, where Morgan, the director, sat with her perfect posture and her endless rehearsed empathy. She had looked at me with soft eyes that carried no warmth. "Adriana, there have been concerns," she had said, folding her hands on the desk. "Concerns about what?" She shifted slightly, as though even she did not believe the words she was paid to deliver. "About collaboration. About fitting in." Fitting in, the phrase echoed like a cruel joke. What they meant was that I had become inconvenient. I asked questions they did not want to answer. I pushed for clarity when ambiguity served them better. "You know my record," I replied. "You know the clients I have brought in, the revenue I have secured. If there are concerns, let us put numbers on the table." Her smile remained. Sometimes performance is not the only measure. I left her office that day knowing the ground was already shifting beneath me. In meetings after that, invitations stopped arriving in my inbox. Documents passed from one team to another without my name. Conversations hushed when I entered the room. Slowly, quietly, I was erased before the final cut came. That was why I had prepared. The memory faded as my phone buzzed against the desk. A new email had arrived. I opened it with the caution of someone expecting another blow. It was from Orion Tech. The message was brief, polite, and careful. They thanked me again for the clarity of my presentation. They said they valued the professionalism I had shown under difficult circumstances. And then, a single line that set my heart pounding. "We would like to remain in touch regarding your future work with Aurelia Consulting." I read the sentence 3 times, the words glowing brighter each time. They had seen the truth. They knew where the vision truly lived, not in Helios, not in Victor's empty promises. But in me, I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, I allowed myself to smile without restraint. Sophia's legal forms, Marcus's financial models, my frameworks, they were not just pieces on a table anymore. They were a living foundation, and Orion Tech had just given us the first spark of validation. I stood and walked to the whiteboard. The 3 words still glared back at me. Clarity, integrity, trust. I touched the marker to the board and drew a circle around them. This was no longer survival. This was ignition. That night I left the office later than ever, but lighter. The city air felt less heavy, the darkness less suffocating. Helios had tried to isolate me, to strip away every ally, every ounce of recognition. Instead, they had forged me into something sharper. They thought they had ended my career. They had only ended their chance to own it, and Oralia was only just beginning. 3 days passed after Orion's first message, and I learned again that silence could be louder than words. Every morning I checked my inbox, and every morning there was nothing. Sophia said not to worry. They are deliberating, she told me. Big companies move slowly. But I knew Orion. They were precise, decisive, allergic to delay. Silence meant something had broken. On the 4th morning, the email arrived. It was addressed to Helios leadership, but someone sympathetic inside forwarded it to me. A single line told the whole story. We would like confirmation that Adriana Cross will remain our primary contact for this project. Reading it sent a strange mixture of pride and grief through me. Pride, because Orion saw the truth. Grief, because I already knew the answer Helios would give them. I did not have to wait long. 2 hours later, another email came. This time from Helios, signed with the CEO's polished insignia. Victor Hale will be leading this initiative, supported by our senior operations team. Cold, efficient, dismissive, my name nowhere to be found. For the rest of that day, I felt the weight of inevitability pressing on me. Orion had asked for me. Helios had given them Victor. The relationship was already splintering. That evening, Sophia paced our small office. It is their arrogance, she said. They think clients care more about the Helios name than about the people who actually do the work. Sometimes clients do, I replied, but not Orion, they know the difference. Marcus sat quietly, arms folded. The question is whether you want to intervene now or wait. If you reach out too quickly, they may think you are desperate. I am not desperate, I said sharply. I am honest, and honesty is rare enough that it might actually matter. Sophia stopped pacing. Then tell them the truth, without bitterness, without begging, just the truth. That night, I wrote the email. Dear Orion team, as of this week, I am no longer with Helios Global. It was an honor to collaborate with you on the integration project, and I am grateful for the trust you showed during my time there. I wish you success as you move forward. Should you ever require my support through my new venture, Oralia Consulting, I remain at your disposal. I read the lines aloud to myself. No accusation, no pleading, just grace. When I pressed send, a wave of calm settled over me. 2 days later, Orion responded. Their email was short. They thanked Helios for the information. And then they wrote, until further notice, we will pause negotiations on this project. It was a single sentence, but I could feel its impact like thunder rolling across the industry. Helios had lost their grip. Inside Oralia, the reaction was quiet but electric. Sophia smiled for the first time in days. Marcus exhaled a low whistle, shaking his head. They have no idea what just happened, he murmured. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Helios had tried to erase me with 6 words. Now Orion had returned the strike with 12. It was not victory yet, but it was the first undeniable proof that Oralia was more than an idea. It was a contender. That night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself to imagine the boardroom at Helios. The CEO frowning, Victor scrambling for explanations, executives whispering doubts. They would not admit it aloud, not yet, but a crack had formed in their foundation, and all it had taken was the absence of one name. Mine. 2 nights after Orion's pause, my phone buzzed close to midnight. The name on the screen made me sit up instantly. Elena Moore. She was still inside Helios, a junior strategist I had mentored. Young, eager, sharp, I had not heard from her since the day they cut me loose. I answered, and her voice came rushed and breathless. They are panicking, Adriana. You should know. I pressed the phone closer. Tell me? They called 3 emergency meetings today. The board is furious that Orion pulled out. Victor keeps saying it is temporary, that Orion just needs reassurance, but everyone can see it. The trust is gone. People are whispering about you in the hallways. Some of them are saying you should never have been pushed out. Her words pierced through me like sunlight breaking heavy clouds. Elena, I said softly, be careful. Do not put yourself at risk. I am already at risk, she replied. The culture here is toxic. They treat us like pawns. I only stay because I need the paycheck. But after tonight, I just wanted you to know they are not winning. For a moment, I could not speak. My throat tightened, not from anger this time, but from something gentler. Gratitude. Thank you, I managed. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring out at the city skyline. Somewhere across town, Helios executives were scrambling, while a young woman they underestimated was brave enough to tell me the truth. The next morning, I shared the call with Sophia and Marcus. Sophia allowed herself a rare grin. "The cracks are showing." Marcus leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head. "But cracks do not bring down towers. Not yet." His caution was practical, but the flicker in his eyes was there again. Something unreadable, quick, then gone. I pushed the thought away. "We do not need their tower to collapse," I said. "We only need our foundation to rise." I pointed to the whiteboard where our principles still glared. Clarity, integrity, trust. These are not just words, they are weapons. Orion paused because they sensed the absence of integrity. "Helios cannot fake it. We can prove it." Sophia nodded. "Then Aurelia must be visible. Every move we make from now on has to tell clients who we are." I felt the truth settle into me. Helios had already lost something more valuable than a contract. They had lost credibility. And credibility, once gone, is not easily rebuilt. That afternoon, I sat by the office window, watching the streets below. People hurried, phones pressed to ears, chasing numbers and deadlines. Once, I had been one of them, sprinting inside Helios's glass fortress, believing loyalty was enough to earn safety. Now I knew better. Aurelia was not a fortress. It was a flame. Small, fragile, but real. And flames, if fed with the right fuel, could spread faster than anyone expected. When I closed my eyes that evening, I did not see the sterile rectangle of my termination anymore. I saw the beginning of something that frightened Helios more than my presence ever had. My absence. By the end of the week, the whispers had spread beyond Orion and Helios. Industry newsletters began running cautious headlines. Orion pauses integration with Helios. No details, no commentary, just the fact itself. But in our world, facts were never neutral. Clients read between the lines. Competitors dissected the silence. Investors sniffed for weakness. And in each corner of the city, the story was retold with new edges, always circling back to the same unanswered question: why did Orion pause? I walked into the office that morning with the printout of one such article in my hand. Sophia took it from me, scanned it quickly, and smiled in that sharp way of hers. "This is the beginning," she said. "They will speculate, they will ask questions, and sooner or later someone will point directly to you." Marcus raised his brows, half amused, half wary. "Careful, attention is a double-edged sword. Once they start watching you, every move you make will matter." "I want them to watch," I said. My voice surprised even me with its steadiness. "I have hidden long enough. Helios thrived on shadows. Aurelia will live in the open." We worked late into the evening, shaping the outlines of Aurelia's first public face. A modest website, a statement of principles. Nothing grand, nothing boastful, just clarity. When the draft page went live that night, a rush of electricity moved through me. The logo glowed on the screen, a simple circle, the color of dawn. The name beneath it, Aurelia Consulting. For the first time, the company existed in a form the world could see. I stared at it longer than I expected. This was no longer just an idea whispered between three people in a bare office. It was a presence, a declaration. As I closed my laptop, I thought of Orion. Somewhere in their high-rise headquarters, executives were still debating the future of their integration. They might not have made a decision yet, but they had already given me the greatest gift. Proof that Aurelia was real. Proof that we were not invisible. I stepped to the window and looked out at the city. Lights shimmered like scattered stars, each one a story, a possibility. Helios had its fortress of glass. Aurelia had only a spark, but sparks, if guarded and fed, could start wildfires. And deep down, I knew we had just lit the first one. The email from Orion arrived on a Tuesday morning, as sudden and unexpected as a flash of lightning. I had just set my coffee down, still half asleep, when the notification appeared on my screen. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the subject line was clear, the sender unmistakable. "Adriana, we would like to explore the possibility of a smaller engagement with Aurelia Consulting, focused on integration diagnostics. If you are available for a call later this week, please advise." I froze. My hand hovered over the trackpad, unwilling to click away, unwilling to let the moment vanish. My chest tightened as if I had been holding my breath for months and only now remembered how to inhale. "Read this," I whispered, sliding the laptop across the table to Sophia. She skimmed the lines quickly, her sharp eyes widening. Then, for the first time since I had known her, she laughed. Not the polite, restrained sound she usually gave, but a genuine burst of disbelief and joy. "They chose you, not Helios. You realize what this means?" Before I could answer, Marcus leaned over, reading from behind her shoulder. His smile came slower, more measured, but it was there. It means they are testing the waters, he said. Careful but promising. Promising, careful. He had a way of trimming hope down to its safest edges, but I didn't want safe edges, I wanted fire. We take it, I said firmly. No hesitation. Sophia nodded, already pulling a notepad toward her. Every flame begins small. The days leading up to the call blurred together in a rush of work. Sophia drafted contracts, her handwriting filling page after page with clauses and revisions. I refined my frameworks late into the night, adjusting details, rehearsing explanations. I could feel old instincts waking up, the strategist in me stretching like a muscle I hadn't used since the boardroom humiliation. Marcus handled the numbers, budgets, projections, cash flow estimates. He did his job well, but there was something different about his energy. Sometimes he seemed distracted, staring out the window as though seeing something I could not. Once or twice, I caught him ending a phone call the second I entered the room. When I asked, he shrugged it off. Personal, he said with a smile too quick to be convincing. I wanted to press, but Aurelia was too fragile to risk friction now. I swallowed my doubts and returned to the work. The call with Orion took place on a Friday afternoon. The three of us gathered around the conference table, if you could call it that. In truth, it was just a long second-hand desk with laptops balanced on uneven surfaces, but to me it felt like the command center of something far larger. When Orion's team joined the line, their voices were crisp and professional. They asked questions about our capacity, about what differentiated Aurelia from Helios. I answered without hesitation. We are small, yes, but that is our strength. No bureaucracy, no politics, just direct partnership and accountability. You will never wonder who is making decisions because it will always be me speaking directly with you. There was a pause. My heart pounded. Then the CFO spoke. That is exactly what we need right now. When the call ended, the room stayed silent for a beat. Then Sophia grinned and clapped her hands together. We did it. Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly. First blood, he murmured. I laughed, the sound bursting out of me. Relief, joy, disbelief, all tangled together. For the first time since that sterile rectangle appeared on my tablet screen, I felt alive again. The project began the following Monday. It was small, only a diagnostic analysis, but we treated it like the most important engagement of our lives. Sophia handled compliance, reading every line of every clause until her eyes burned red. I spent hours immersed in Orion's systems, tracing weak points, identifying redundancies, building clear reports that even non-technical executives could understand. And Marcus kept the numbers in line, timesheets, costs, billing. He brought pastries in the mornings, cracked dry jokes when tension ran too high, played the role of steady anchor. But sometimes, when the office grew quiet, I noticed his gaze drifting. His laptop tilted away. His phone pressed close to his ear as he whispered in the hallway, always brief, always unexplained. Personal, he said again when I asked. His smile was calm, reassuring, too calm, too rehearsed. Our first review meeting with Orion arrived faster than I expected. Sophia and I presented the findings over video conference, our slides clean, our voices steady. I watched their faces carefully, reading every twitch, every pause. By the end of the call, the CEO of Orion leaned back in his chair and nodded. This is clear, actionable, exactly what we wanted. When the screen went dark, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Sophia closed her laptop with a satisfied snap. We passed their test, she said. Marcus only smiled. For now. That night, we celebrated with cheap wine poured into paper cups. The office still smelled faintly of paint and carpet glue, but in the glow of our laughter it felt almost glamorous. To Aurelia, Sophia said, raising her cup. To freedom, I added. Marcus lifted his last. To opportunity. The word struck me, not wrong but different. Freedom was about breaking chains. Aurelia was about building something new. But opportunity, that was a ladder, something climbed and left behind once higher ground was reached. I sipped my wine and said nothing. As the project continued, I found myself arriving earlier each morning, driven by a fire I could not extinguish. I covered the whiteboard with diagrams and arrows, sometimes erasing them only to start again. I worked until my shoulders ached, until my eyes blurred. Sophia matched me step for step, tireless and precise. She rarely smiled, but when she did, it was genuine, and those moments carried me. Marcus, though, he began to shift. He still brought pastries, still cracked jokes, but his eyes wandered. I caught him one evening standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones. When he noticed me, he ended the call abruptly. Another personal matter? I asked. Always, he said with that same too-quick smile. I nodded, but unease coiled in my stomach. The final report for Orion was delivered 3 weeks later. Sophia and I sent it at midnight, exhausted but proud. We knew it was strong. Every weakness addressed, every recommendation clear. Their response came the next morning. Thank you, this exceeds expectations. We will discuss internally about potential next steps. I read the words aloud to Sophia. She smiled, tired but triumphant. Marcus, however, only nodded. We will see. His restraint frustrated me. I wanted him to celebrate, to let the victory sink in. Instead, he treated it like a temporary reprieve. That night, long after they had both left, I stayed in the office alone. The whiteboard glared back at me. Clarity, integrity, trust. I underlined trust 3 times, because Orlaya's first flame was burning bright. But trust, that most fragile element, already felt as though it were flickering in the wind. The weeks after Orion's trial project were the brightest Orlaya had ever known. Our office no longer felt like an empty shell, it pulsed with energy. Whiteboards crowded with diagrams, laptops buzzing late into the night, takeout boxes stacked in the corner like small trophies of our dedication. Sophia worked like a machine, drafting proposals with relentless focus. I caught her asleep at her desk more than once, her glasses askew, pen still in hand. She was the spine of Orlaya, holding the fragile structure upright while I pushed forward with vision. And Marcus was everywhere. He cracked jokes when tension ran too high, brought coffee before dawn, scribbled quick financial models that somehow balanced down to the decimal. He had a gift for making the impossible feel manageable. Yet even as he played his part, something gnawed at me. It began small, missed explanations, moments of distraction. His phone would vibrate and he would excuse himself, stepping into the hallway with a calm smile. His laptop was always angled away when I approached, the screen dimmed just a shade too quickly. I told myself it was nothing. After Helios, suspicion had become my shadow, always following close. Perhaps I was projecting my own paranoia. But the unease refused to leave. One afternoon, as we finalized a follow-up proposal for Orion, Marcus excused himself for a quick call. I continued working, but I could hear his voice faintly through the thin walls. Not the words, just the rhythm measured, restrained, the cadence of someone choosing sentences with precision. When he returned, his smile was intact, too intact. What did Orion say? Sophia asked without looking up. Marcus blinked. Orion, you said a client call. Oh no, personal. He laughed it off, reaching for his laptop. I exchanged a glance with Sophia, but she was too buried in her documents to notice the way his hand trembled slightly as he typed. That night I left the office later than usual. The city air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain on asphalt. As I walked to my car, I glanced up at our window. The lights were still on. I frowned. I had been the last to leave. I climbed back upstairs quietly, the hum of the elevator echoing in the empty building. The door to our office was ajar. Inside, Marcus sat alone, laptop glowing. His face was lit pale blue, eyes narrowed as he typed quickly. I froze in the hallway, watching through the gap. Then he spoke, softly, almost inaudible. She doesn't suspect. My blood ran cold. I slipped back into the elevator before he noticed, my heart pounding against my ribs. The next morning, Marcus acted as though nothing had happened. He strolled into the office with 2 cups of coffee, dropping one on Sophia's desk, the other in front of me. Double shot just the way you like it, he said, grinning. I forced a smile, but the words from last night echoed in my skull. She doesn't suspect. Every gesture, every casual word of his suddenly felt rehearsed. I watched him too closely, searching for cracks. He noticed, I think, his eyes lingered on me a moment longer than usual before he turned back to his laptop. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to act normal, but inside I was on fire. The office was quiet that afternoon. Sophia had gone to file incorporation paperwork downtown, leaving just the 2 of us. Marcus busied himself with spreadsheets, headphones in, humming faintly to some song I couldn't hear. I tried to focus on Orion's feedback notes, but my eyes kept drifting to the glow of his screen. Numbers, charts, projections, always projections. Then he stood, stretching. I need air, he said, grabbing his jacket. Back in 10. The door clicked shut behind him. I sat frozen, pulse racing. His laptop was still open. For long minutes I stared at it, torn between restraint and instinct. But the memory of his whisper from the night before gnawed at me until I could not resist. I slid into his chair and touched the trackpad. The screen woke instantly. His inbox was open. At first it looked harmless, internal notes, invoices, reminders. Then my eyes caught a subject line buried halfway down. Helios Confidential. My breath caught. I clicked. The message was short, a draft saved but unsent, addressed to Victor Hale. My vision blurred as I read the lines. Orion's hesitation is deeper than expected. She doesn't suspect anything yet. We'll keep feeding updates. The room tilted around me. I gripped the desk, willing myself not to collapse. There it was. Proof. Not just whispers through thin walls, not just my paranoia. Actual words etched into digital stone. Marcus had been bleeding Orlia's lifeblood straight back to the company that had tried to bury me. My chest burned with rage. I wanted to smash the laptop, to storm into Helios headquarters and drag Victor's smug face across his own polished desk. I wanted to confront Marcus, to spit the truth back at him until the mask cracked. But another voice whispered inside me. Calm. Cold. Not yet. Orlia was still fragile. If I lashed out now, the fire we had lit would die in the blast. So I closed the laptop gently, returning the screen to its tidy row of spreadsheets as though nothing had ever been disturbed. When Marcus returned minutes later, humming again, I met his smile with one of my own. Everything good? He asked. Perfect, I said smoothly. My voice surprised me with its calmness. He nodded, oblivious, and returned to his seat. I turned back to my notes, my hands trembling under the desk. Inside me, a decision crystallized. I would not confront him today. I would not expose my knowledge. I would watch. I would gather. I would wait. Because the hidden blade was sharp, yes, but only if I let him strike first. For the next several days, I became an actress in my own office. I smiled when Marcus cracked his jokes, laughed at his stories, nodded at his neat financial models. I thanked him for the coffee, listened when he pointed out numbers on the whiteboard, played the role of partner. But inside, every word tasted bitter. I was memorizing him, every gesture, every glance, every time his phone buzzed and he slipped away. Sophia noticed the tension. One afternoon, she leaned close while Marcus was out, whispering, "You're quieter lately. Something wrong?" I forced a casual shrug. "Just tired." She didn't push, but her eyes lingered on me, searching for truths I wasn't ready to share. The break came on a Thursday evening. We had just finished reviewing Orion's feedback on the diagnostic report. Sophia left first, muttering about an early morning at the notary. Marcus gathered his things slowly, phone pressed to his ear as he mumbled, "I'll be there soon." Something in his tone, urgent, low, almost deferential, made the hair on my arms rise. When he walked out, I waited a full minute, then grabbed my coat and followed. The city was alive with neon and traffic, horns blaring, pedestrians weaving between cars. I kept my distance as Marcus drove, headlights cutting through the drizzle. He didn't notice me trailing, too focused on his phone, his head bent as if listening to instructions. At last he pulled up in front of a building I knew too well. Glass, steel, gleaming like a monument in the night. Helios headquarters. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I parked half a block away, engine idling, rain tapping against the windshield. I watched as Marcus stepped out, straightened his jacket, and entered through the revolving doors like he belonged there. The sight hollowed me. Minutes bled into an hour. I sat frozen, pulse thundering. Part of me wanted to storm inside, to drag him out into the street and shout the truth for all to hear, to let Helios see that I was not blind. But another part of me, colder, sharper, kept me still. Confrontation now would only destroy Orlia. Our flame was still fragile. If I moved too soon, I would be the one branded unstable, reckless. Helios would win again. So I waited, headlights reflecting on the wet pavement, until Marcus finally emerged. He was on the phone, his voice calm, his expression unreadable. He slipped into his car, never glancing back. I let him drive away before I pulled into the traffic myself. Back in my apartment, I collapsed into a chair, soaked from the rain, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Helios had ever done. They had fired me with cold efficiency. Marcus had pretended to stand beside me while driving the knife. I stared at the dark window, the city lights fractured into distorted patterns on the glass. For the first time in years, tears stung my eyes, not from weakness but from rage too sharp to contain. I thought of the whiteboard in our office. Clarity, integrity, trust, words I had underlined until the marker bled. Now I knew trust was the illusion he had used to get close, but clarity and integrity, those were mine. I wiped my face, stood, and poured a glass of water with hands that no longer trembled. If Marcus thought I didn't suspect, he was wrong. If Helios thought they had planted their spy without consequence, they were wrong. I would not confront him yet. I would not play their game on their terms. I would gather. I would plan. I would sharpen my own blade in the dark. And when the moment came, I would strike in a way they never saw coming. The cracks appeared sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after Orion praised our diagnostic report, a message arrived that chilled me. Their project lead wrote politely, almost apologetically, that further decisions regarding long-term engagements were on hold pending internal review. The words were clean, professional, harmless on the surface, but I knew the code. Pending internal review meant doubt. It meant whispers. It meant someone somewhere was feeding poison into their ears. I printed the email and laid it on the desk. Sophia read it in silence, jaw tightening. "This is Helios," she said finally. Her certainty was like a knife. Marcus, sitting across from us, lifted his brows. "Orion is a cautious company. Maybe this has nothing to do with Helios." I looked at him, forcing my face to stay neutral. "You think so?" "Of course," he said smoothly. "Orion would be foolish not to second-guess new partners. This doesn't mean anything." But his eyes flickered when he said it. Just a shadow, quick and sharp, gone before Sophia could notice. I saw it, and I knew. That night, lying awake in the darkness of my apartment, the email burned behind my eyelids. I imagined Victor Hale at his glass desk, smiling as he read whatever Marcus had sent him. I imagined Orion's executives replaying his words, letting doubt coil around them like smoke. The fury inside me threatened to spill over. But fury alone would not save Aurelia. I remembered my last night at Helios, the sterile rectangle on my tablet screen, the empty silence of the boardroom. I remembered how powerless I had felt. Never again. If they wanted to play with shadows, then I would bring everything into the light. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn. The streets were still damp from night rain, the sky pale and heavy with clouds. I unlocked the door, flicked on the lights, and stood in front of the whiteboard. Clarity, integrity, trust. The 3 words glared back at me like old friends, like judges. I underlined clarity this time. If Helios was spreading lies in the dark, Aurelia's survival depended on one thing: being seen, truly seen, not just by Orion, but by anyone watching from the sidelines. Sophia arrived an hour later, surprised to find me already scribbling on the board. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making sure we don't die quietly," I said. Sophia listened quietly as I laid out my plan. Her brow furrowed at first, then gradually smoothed as the pieces fit together. "You want to go public," she said. "Not in the Helios way," I replied. "No flashy launches, no hollow slogans, just honesty. A clear statement of who we are, what we stand for, and why Aurelia exists." She tapped her pen against the table. "Clarity as a weapon." "Exactly." She thought for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. "Then let's do it." We began with the website. The one we had thrown together weeks ago was skeletal, nothing more than a placeholder. Now we tore it down and rebuilt it brick by brick. Sophia wrote copy that bled conviction. I crafted case studies from the Orion project, framing every detail with precision. "Keep it simple," I told her. "Don't sell, just show." At night, when the office was silent, I wrote a manifesto of sorts. Not a pitch, not a plea, but a story. My story. The story of why Aurelia existed, born from betrayal and built on 3 words written across a whiteboard in an empty room. When I finished, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the rawness of telling it. Sophia read the draft silently, then closed her laptop and looked at me with something rare in her eyes. Not just respect, belief. "This," she said softly, "this will burn." Marcus played his part in the meantime, watching from the edges. He asked polite questions about the website, offered to crunch numbers for ad campaigns we never planned to run. He smiled when I explained the manifesto, as if amused at my sentimentality. But I noticed how often his phone buzzed, how often he slipped into the hallway. I matched his smile with one of my own. "Don't worry," I said casually one evening. "This isn't just about Orion, it's about every client who has ever doubted what real clarity looks like." "Of course," he murmured. "It's a smart move." His words were smooth, but his eyes darted away too quickly. Inside, my suspicion hardened into certainty. 2 weeks later, we launched. The website went live first, sleek, minimal, unflinching. Our story filled the front page. No jargon, no puffed-up promises, just raw truth about who we were and why Aurelia mattered. Then came the article. Sophia distributed it to every industry newsletter and LinkedIn group she could reach. It wasn't long before the first responses trickled in. Refreshing. Bold. Finally, someone honest. I sat at my desk late that night, scrolling through the comments. My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in years. Not vindication, not yet, but recognition. For the first time, Aurelia wasn't invisible. Of course, visibility cut both ways. A day after the article spread, Marcus walked into the office looking more polished than usual. His shirt pressed, his jacket sharp. Big day. Sophia teased, He smiled too quickly. Dinner plans, but I knew better. When he slipped out early that evening, I waited a few minutes before stepping to the window. Below, I watched him hail a cab, phone already pressed to his ear. The mask was slipping, and I would be ready when it fell. The first ripple came from Orion. Their CFO reached out 2 days after our manifesto spread, not with a decision, but with curiosity. We read your piece. It was unconventional. Could we arrange a short conversation about your principles? Unconventional. That word alone told me we had struck something real. Sophia scheduled the call, her face unreadable as always, but when she met my eyes, there was a spark. We had given Orion something Helios never could: honesty without polish. During the call, I spoke plainly. No slides, no charts, just truth. We believe trust is not a contract term. It's an operating principle. Without it, no partnership survives. That's why Oralia exists. The Orion team listened in silence. When the call ended, they thanked me and promised to consider next steps. Their voices held weight this time. Less doubt, more reflection. After the call, Sophia leaned back, folding her arms. You cut through, she said. They couldn't look away. But Marcus's smile was thin. They're still hesitating. Don't celebrate too soon. His warning might have been wise, but I heard the unease beneath it. The weeks that followed tested every nerve in me. Some days Orion went silent, and I felt the ground crack beneath my feet. Other days, a message arrived, tentative but interested, and I felt Oralia rise again like a phoenix from ash. Meanwhile, industry chatter grew louder. The manifesto circulated in newsletters, quoted in forums, dissected in think pieces. People debated whether Oralia was naive or brave, foolish or revolutionary. But the important part was this: they were talking about us. Helios, in all its size, could not drown us out anymore. Marcus began to change. He grew restless, fidgeting more during meetings, snapping his laptop shut even faster when I walked by. One night after Sophia left, I pretended to stay buried in paperwork as Marcus lingered. He stepped onto the balcony with his phone, voice low. I couldn't hear the words, but his posture gave him away. Head bowed, shoulders tight, like a man delivering bad news. When he returned, his smile was pasted on crooked, almost brittle. Everything good? I asked lightly. Perfect, he said, the same word I had once used to mask my knowledge. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he sensed that the game was shifting under him. By the end of the month, Orion sent their verdict. Not a full contract, not yet, but they wanted a proposal for a second, larger trial, this time involving integration rollout, not just diagnostics. Sophia read the email aloud, her usually calm tone cracking with excitement. This is it, she whispered. They're giving us the real test. I felt the weight settle over me, not crushing, but exhilarating. This was the chain breaking, not because Orion trusted us fully, not yet, but because they had chosen to look past the shadows Helios tried to cast. They had chosen to see us in the light. That night, I stood alone in the office. The city glittered beyond the window, restless and endless. I stared at the whiteboard, at the 3 words that had carried me this far. Clarity, integrity, trust. I touched the marker to the board and circled integrity this time, because Oralia was no longer fighting for survival in the dark. We were building in the open. And in the open, integrity was the only shield that mattered. Marcus's shadow loomed still, his blade hidden but trembling. Helios waited, biding their time, but I had felt the chains loosen. I would not be bound again. Not by Victor Hale. Not by Helios. Not by the traitor sitting across from me. The broken chains clattered silently to the floor, and in their place rose something harder, sharper: resolve. The warning arrived not through whispers this time, but as a storm. One Monday morning, Sophia walked into the office pale and furious, her phone clutched tight. She slammed it on the desk and turned the screen toward me. Read. It was an industry blog, one of the most followed in our field. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Can Oralia Consulting be trusted? Inside sources suggest otherwise." My stomach twisted as I scanned the text. It was a smear job, thinly veiled as analysis. It claimed Oralia was unstable, that our leadership was fractured, that I had been ousted from Helios not for integrity but for incompetence. The piece dripped with insinuations, each one designed to wound. Sophia's eyes burned. This came from Helios. There's no other explanation. I looked at Marcus. He leaned back in his chair, face unreadable. It's just noise. Blogs will write anything for clicks. But I saw it in the twitch of his jaw, the too smooth calm. He knew. He had fed them the blade, and now they were swinging it. The next hours blurred into chaos. Emails trickled in from Orion, cautious again, asking for clarifications. Other potential leads went silent. The weight of the article pressed down like a stone, threatening to suffocate the flame we had fought so hard to ignite. Sophia paced the office, muttering strategies, rebuttals, legal threats. "We can't let this stand. We need to fight back to publish a statement." "No," I said firmly. She stopped. "What do you mean no?" I met her eyes. "If we fight them on their terms, we lose. They want us in the mud. They want us to defend, to look weak." Sophia's brow furrowed, but she listened. "They can smear us all they want," I continued, "but truth has a way of cutting through. We keep working. We stay visible. We deliver results. That's the only answer." Sophia exhaled slowly, then nodded. Marcus said nothing. He only watched, silent, his fingers tapping against his laptop in a slow, steady rhythm. That night, I sat alone in the dark office, the glow of the city pressing against the windows. The article still burned in my mind, but so did something else, the memory of Marcus's whisper. "She doesn't suspect." But I did. And now the world would too, because Marcus had overplayed his hand. The blade was no longer hidden. It was out in the open, gleaming under the light. And once in the open, even a blade could be turned. The fallout from the article spread like wildfire. By midweek, every newsletter and discussion board in our field carried some mention of Oralia. Some dismissed the accusations outright, others fanned the flames. The air was thick with speculation. In the middle of the storm, Orion called for an urgent meeting. Their CEO's face filled the screen, sharp and weary. "We need clarity," he said bluntly. "These allegations are serious. If there's truth to them, we cannot proceed." The silence in our office was heavy. I could feel Sophia's pulse from across the table. Marcus sat perfectly still, gaze fixed on the screen. I drew in a steady breath. The truth is simple. I was pushed out of Helios because I refused to bend. They will say otherwise because they fear what Oralia represents. You wanted integrity? This is it. Integrity means telling the story even when it hurts. The CEO's eyes narrowed, studying me. "And your team, can they be trusted?" I let the question hang, then turned deliberately toward Marcus. "Every partnership rests on trust. If there are doubts, better to confront them now." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Of course we can be trusted," he said quickly, voice too smooth. "This is all noise, nothing more." But his tone rang false, even to my ears, and I knew Orion heard it too. After the call, Sophia cornered me in the hallway. "Why did you put him on the spot like that?" "Because the cracks need to show," I whispered. "They'll see him for what he is if we let him talk long enough." She stared at me, searching my face. "You know something?" I hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Not the full truth, not yet, but enough. Sophia's expression hardened. She didn't ask further. She didn't need to. The next days were a blur of work and waiting. We doubled down on deliverables for Orion's second trial, refusing to let the smear campaign derail us. Sophia pushed contracts forward with relentless precision. I immersed myself in strategy sessions, building reports that glowed with clarity, and Marcus grew restless. His jokes fell flat, his coffee runs less frequent. He spent more time on the balcony, whispering into his phone. His smile felt brittle, cracking at the edges. One evening, I caught him lingering after Sophia left. His laptop screen reflected in the glass window behind him. I glimpsed a subject line before he closed it: Orion internal discussions. He turned too quickly, his face tightening. "Long night," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. "Yeah," I said evenly, "for all of us." Our eyes met for a long, unbroken second. His gaze was steady, but I saw it, the flicker of unease, the realization that I knew more than I let on. By the end of that week, Orion sent another message. "We are aware of conflicting narratives regarding Oralia and Helios. We value transparency above all. Can you provide direct evidence of your processes, decisions, and communications to date?" It was a lifeline, a challenge, and an opportunity. I gathered every file, every timestamp, every note from our work. We laid it bare, nothing hidden, nothing polished, the truth in raw form. When we sent it, I felt a calm settle over me, because Helios could fabricate stories. Marcus could whisper in shadows, but the truth was untouchable. The silence after we sent our files was unbearable. Days stretched like weeks, every email notification setting my heart pounding. Sophia buried herself in drafting contingency plans, her hands trembling only when she thought I wasn't watching. Marcus grew quieter. He still came to the office, still typed away at his laptop, but the easy charm was gone. He no longer cracked jokes or filled the silence with small talk. He watched me too closely now, as though waiting for me to slip, but I did not slip. I waited. The call came on a gray Friday morning. Orion's leadership filled the screen again, their expressions grave. "We've reviewed your submissions," the CEO began. His voice was steady, deliberate. "The evidence is clear. Oralia has been transparent in its work. The The smear campaign is precisely that, a campaign, and we will not allow it to cloud our judgment. Sophia let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. But the CEO wasn't finished. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. There is, however, a troubling pattern. Information we shared with Oralia has found its way back to Helios in distorted form. That can only mean one thing. His gaze flicked across the screen, straight at Marcus. The silence cracked like glass. Marcus cleared his throat, forcing a smile. Surely you don't think? Enough, the CEO cut him off. We know where the leaks came from. Consider this your last meeting with Orion. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. I stared at Marcus, letting the weight of the moment press down. His mask slipped then. The calm smile shattered. His eyes burned with something between rage and panic. You think you're clever, Adriana, he hissed. But Helios will crush you. You can't fight them. I held his gaze. I already am. He left that afternoon, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. His desk sat empty, the chair turned askew, the faint scent of his cologne lingering like smoke after fire. Sophia stood by the window, silent. Do you think he'll go back to Helios? She asked finally. I shook my head. He never left. That evening, Orion sent their final message. We are proceeding with the second trial. Helios's influence will not dictate our choices. We value what Oralia stands for, and we are willing to stand with you. The words blurred as I read them aloud, my throat tight. Sophia smiled through tears, her composure finally breaking. And me, I felt something shift inside. Not triumph, not relief, but release, the last chain snapping free. I stayed in the office long after Sophia left. The city glowed outside, restless and alive. I walked to the whiteboard and looked at the 3 words written months ago in a bare room. Clarity, integrity, trust. This time I circled all 3. Because Oralia had been tested by fire, cut by betrayal, smeared in public, and still, we stood. Helios had tried to bury me once. Marcus had driven the knife again, but both had failed. And in their failure, Oralia had become something greater than a company. We had become a flame. Not the small flicker of a fragile startup, but a blaze others could see, could feel, could believe in. As I turned off the lights and stepped into the night, I whispered the word to myself, a promise, a vow. Oralia. The flame burned on.